we've had three bits of information in the last 24 hours. You've had the big YouGov survey, more than 100,000 people, where they try and guess or project the results of every constituency. And compared with the similar exercise a fortnight ago, they show the Conservative majority, which they then projected at 68, now down to 28. So nervy times for the Conservatives. And I'm told that within that YouGov survey, which is done over the last 10 days or so, there seems to be some narrowing within that in the last 2 or 3 days. We've had a poll out this afternoon from Opinion, who've been polling for the Observer throughout the campaign. They've done an update, and they show a Conservative lead of 12%. Pretty healthy lead, except that Opinion has been at the top end of all the pollsters. Right. And compared with the last poll in Sunday's Observer, when it was 15%, that's a 3-point narrowing. And there's a poll on the Bloomberg News website showing a 10-point lead. But again, the guy, Matt Singh, who's organised it, says there are signs within it that, again, the gap may have narrowed in the last 24 hours. Straws in the wind. I'd like to see more polls tonight, but these fragments of evidence from the last 24 hours suggest that maybe there is a late swing.
Will you be clearer by tomorrow morning of what the polls are saying? And do we call these last polls, do we call them predictions?
Yes, I think we can. So, what the pollsters, if they get it right, they say, yes, our prediction was right. If they get it wrong, they say, no, that was our projection 24 hours earlier, and it changed after we... But what I'll tell you what I'll be looking for, what I advise people to do, is not look at any one poll in isolation, whether the Conservative is 8 or 10 or 12% or whatever it is, but to look at what that poll said last time. In other words, different polls, some polls have been showing significantly bigger leads throughout the campaign than other polls. Their methods vary slightly. So it's important, if you're trying to measure if there's any late swing, compare like with like. So if all the polls, or the preponderance of polls, show either a narrowing of the gap or a widening of the gap, that is much more significant than whether the level of the Conservative lead is 6, 8, 10, 12%.
And as you've looked at all the polls in recent days, how much volatility do you see in them?
There hasn't been that much volatility since the campaign started. There was a lot of volatility in the summer after the European elections, with the Brexit Party and the Liberal Democrats doing very well, and then they slid back during the autumn. Over the last 3 or 4 weeks, there's not been much volatility. But, Eddie, 2 buts. The first is, we know from the last 2 elections the polls don't get it right. And although the Conservative lead looks pretty healthy at around 10 percentage points, it doesn't need to slip. The polls don't have to be that wrong for the Conservatives not to have to lose their overall majority. And in addition, if there is a late swing, if there is differential turnout, if there is tactical voting, then it maybe tomorrow night the story will be significantly different from what we thought it was a few days ago.
What about the exit poll, which all the broadcasters will be referring to in the stroke of 10 o'clock tomorrow night, once the polls close, including Ian and Sheila here on LBC from 5 to 10. Will the exit poll, given all the vagaries of this particular election, do you think it will be a pretty good guide as to where the result will end up?
What we know is for the last, 5 general elections, from 2005 onwards, when the broadcasters got together and they've done a joint exit poll, they have been pretty good. Not necessarily spot on, and sometimes they've been out in one part of the country and out in the opposite direction in another part, so it's evened out. But it's been a pretty good guide. This is going to be the toughest election for the exit pollsters, because I think there's going to be much more variation in the swing, many more local factors, the possibility of tactical voting in some places and not in others, regional variations. So it'll probably be fairly good at 10 o'clock. After all, there's no possibility of late swing after the exit poll has been done. We know they've got voters. There's no question of differential turnout because they're polling people who have just voted. So they got these 2 big advantages over conventional opinion polls. That's one of the reasons why they've been pretty good. So if they point to a Conservative majority of 60 or so, then you can be pretty sure the Conservatives have won outright. If they point to a Conservative majority of 20 or 30, then it ain't all over. It might not be clear till 3 or 4 o'clock on Friday morning as to what's really going on.